with their holiday concert. So go to the concert, participate in the silent auction if you can. And feel free to help yourself too. It does have nuts in it, it's almond.
I see it's on December 17th at Lakewood.
Yeah, thank you.
At Lakewood Elementary School, is that correct?
Yes.
December 17th. Okay. Thank you. So the first order of business we have on the Human Resources Committee for this December 2018 meeting is the staffing report. Were there any questions related to the staffing report? Okay. Seeing none, I see that we have a placeholder item under action items. Minimum wage increase proposed rates. And Ms. Kinnear.
Yep. So the minimum wage is increasing to $9.86, and that's an approximate 2.17% increase from the last one that was in January of this year.
Okay, so we're looking to potentially approve this at our board meeting next week to be in compliance with minimum wage requirements.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the sheet is in there for the various job. It's our hourly and substitutes are the only ones that are below currently the minimum wage.
Okay.
And so we made a list of those that would be impacted, and then we've provided that to you.
Thank you. Is there any kind of just written overview of this update somewhere, or are we just taking it as informational as the rates on here? I know some folks.
The rate is on there, but it's by law.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Seeing Member Trinket.
I'm just assuming that this is going to be built into our budget as well that's coming up? Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Member Lafleur-Kemp. Good.
Sorry about that. I did want to mention Member Lofold wanted me to make sure everyone knew she is out of town for a debate tournament, so won't be with us.
All right. I believe that concludes our Human Resources Committee. It will be a brief report next Tuesday. Yes. All right. And then, so I concluded that at the right time as Member Trinka was bringing around our treat here from Member Lafleur-Kemp. Thank you.
Well, Member Gorham, that might be a record. Okay, starting the business committee meeting, we're actually going to begin with a presentation from the folks who are joining us from the Safe Schools, Safe Routes committee. So we'll let them kick this off.
And I'd like to add that this is related to a resolution that the board will be voting on next Tuesday. And we've got James Gittmeyer and Jen from the city of Duluth and Cindy Voigt coming possibly shortly. Oh, Cindy's here. I'm sorry. So we'll let them take over.
Great. Thank you. I'm James Gittmeyer with the Duluth Superior Metropolitan Interstate Council. I'm a transportation planner in this region, and I've worked on Safe Routes to School for the last 14 years. Our office has taken a lead on Safe Routes to School projects. Starting back in 2005, we did a plan for the district, a Safe Routes to School plan. And then with the facilities plan and the revamp of the schools and everything, we came back and took an individual school approach as the schools came back online and new schools were built. And so nearly all of the kind of the urban Duluth schools now have their own individual Safe Routes to School plan. There's a couple exceptions. The high schools are not included in, and one day we still have to get one for Ordine East Middle School. But the recommendations that we're talking about are really coming out of all of those individual Safe Routes to School plans that each school has. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jen.
All right, so I'm Jen Moses. I'm a city planner with the city of Duluth, and I've been working with our engineering department and with the MIC and ARDC folks on many of the Safe Routes to School plans. And when we got the grant announcement with funding available from the state this year, we worked with James and said, okay, let's kind of do a scan of compiling all of the recommendations that came out of those Safe Routes to School plans and identify, where we could put in a funding for a grant application. So we're working on 2 different grant applications. I'll let Cindy Voigt talk about the one that she's heading up. For my part, we're focusing on pedestrian crossings for elementary schools. Our grant is actually for 4 elementary schools. One of those is Bayview, because that is within the city of Duluth, and then there's 3 ISD 709 schools. I can pass around some maps so you can see what those look like. They are all locations that were identified in the Safe Routes to School plan as a need for infrastructure, and you'll see from the symbology on the maps that it includes painted crosswalks, curb extensions or bulb outs to shorten the crossing distances for those students, curb ramps to help kind of improve the accessibility to the sidewalk system. In a couple locations, there's rapid flashing beacons. Those are sort of the places that somebody could push a button and they would see the flashing lights to notify cars that there's somebody in that crossing. And the 3 elementary schools that had pedestrian crossings in their Safe Routes to School plan are Congdon, Laura MacArthur, and Piedmont. So I'll go ahead and pass that around.
Yeah, I'm Cindy Voigt. First, I want to thank the board for all the past resolutions you've done in the last couple of years on West Normal Street, on us when you guys had the transition. I really appreciate that, and all the help that David Spooner and the Transportation Department and principals have done to help us be able to turn in an application. We can't do that without the support that we've gotten. My application, and to go back a step, with these applications, we had to do a priority ranking. City Council passed theirs. We ranked Lincoln Park first, and you had to put in an application based on the type of application. Because we're submitting 2, they're competing against each other. That's why we had to rank them. I put together the proposal for Lincoln Park, which basically was installing infrastructure sidewalk. If you recall, last year I did an ADA transition plan for the city. My priority areas were anything that was identified in the Safe Routes to School plan. I'm working towards replacing sidewalk where I can. I made a small dent this year on, I think it was 9th Street or 8th Street over there. So I'm trying to do it where I can to help everybody, and the purpose of this whole thing, if James and I'll just say it 3 times, to help the students get to school safely and encourage walking. That's why we're going through this exercise. Hopefully we can get some money. I'm not counting on anything, but if we get anything, it'll be important for everybody to actually have something in our pocket. So my improvement is basically sidewalk on the west side from Vernon all the way up to Devonshire. The school district invested in that long private sidewalk that'll help get the students up to there, and then also Atlantic on the east side, replacing a big gap of sidewalk that's on Devonshire that people have cut a footpath through. I'd put a shared use path there, and then also doing Devonshire Street on both sides between Michigan Avenue and Pacific Avenue, and also curb ramp improvements to meet ADA at all 4 corners. And the sidewalk up there in that neighborhood is horrendous. I'd really love to see this project through. If you have questions, let me know. I got a copy of one of the maps, and that kind of presents what we have. We just appreciate your support, and hopefully we get some money.
Okay, I can share this. It has my powdered sugar on it. Do we have a sense of how this actually impacts the safety of the students who are using those crosswalks?
Yeah, since the question is specifically about crosswalks, some of the things like when you do a curb extension, so you're bringing the sidewalk out closer into the street and taking up some of that distance between the driving lane and the curb, you're not only shortening the crossing distance for students, but you're also creating a visual cue for drivers, so that drivers they have another notification that there is a crossing there, and studies have shown that drivers will typically slow down when they see those curb extensions because they have a sense that, oh, okay, it's getting really close to my driving lane, that I should be able to drive that. So that's how that helps. Same thing with the rapid flashing beacons, that those lights just create another visual cue for drivers to pay attention that there's somebody crossing. James might be able to cite, actual studies about them.
Well, I won't steal Cindy's thunder as an engineer. I'm a planner, but the bulbots, the curb extensions, are a proven engineering strategy to make it safer for people to be able to cross streets. So that's proven. The rapid flashing ones, they're new, so they're still, is experimental the right word? So we're still learning a lot nationwide if they're working or not, but they seem very effective. Federal Highway and the state are very supportive of us using those. And so they have basis behind, like, those curb extensions are really, they slow motor vehicles, drivers down, and they shorten the crossing distance, which is shortening the exposure rate that a person is in the street. And like I said, they're a proven measure to use.
Member Gorham. Oh, Member Leffelkamp, my apologies.
Okay, great. Thank you. You guys have been doing this a long time, and I'm so thankful our former Congressman Oberstar had the foresight on this bill back a few years ago. Is there going to be, or maybe there has been already, meetings at schools to kind of inform parents on it or involve parents in kind of understanding what we're doing or gaining information? I know way back I was on one of those committees at Lester Park, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, during the Safe Routes to School planning process, we involved each school and the parents as a part of that. And so in the school, the principal and stuff has been made aware and a part of this process of us implementing these. But we haven't had I don't think we have a direct plan to reach out to the school community population again as a part of this. It was, these were identified in the school plans, and so that's kind of where we're leaving it.
Okay, so after, if we get the grants, would there be other kinds of community information just to help families and neighborhoods understand this? And thank you again, this is so great.
If we get this money, I'm going to come back here and bring you guys donuts. Okay. We'll inform the principal, and these aren't things that impact the student proper. We'll do it over the summer. They'll come back, they'll see the improvement. Maybe we can have the principal do a flyer. And then I'm glad you brought this up because we didn't really point out in the fine print of the application, we'll have to go back and show what progress and document the improvements with another tally with checking to see who's using the infrastructure we're putting in. So there's some requirements on us and the school to work together to just say 10 people use this, it's working, we'll have to send in a report. But nothing that clamorous.
And I will add, and this isn't exactly what you asked in terms of working with the community, but the one nice thing about working on these grant applications is it's given us a chance to go back and reconnect with all of those schools. So we've been working with all of the principals. They've given us letters of support. They've shared with us what they've been working on to encourage students to walk and bike to school in the meantime. And so they all know that we're working on this grant. They've been supportive, and it's been a really nice opportunity for us to touch base with them again and kind of see where everybody's at.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to see some of this stuff up close, and I just want to thank all the organizations at the table here, City of Duluth, ARDC, the MIC, for thinking about our students and prioritizing their safety, well-being, and opportunity to be physically active. Some students don't have a choice but to walk, or some students choose to walk, or some students miss the bus. There's all kinds of scenarios that play out. So thank you for thinking of them and doing your best to make it better for them. I know that transportation infrastructure improvement dollars are scarce and limited. And I know that some of this work is probably a little bit of above and beyond work. So thank you.
I also want to say a thank you and also wonder about the timeline for this, if you could just go over that.
stretching my memory banks. So I'm trying to turn this in before I go on vacation. So after you guys vote on this, when I get back from vacation, I'm going to turn it in. The applications are due January 4th, and then they're going to be determined by, I wouldn't say April, our April ATP meeting where the money gets designated. They tell the selection applicants whether you got the funding or not, and then shortly after April, then if we get the money, clearly I'm going to communicate to you guys and let you know that we got something. But like I said, I'm hopeful but not expecting. So it's just the right thing to do, to turn it in, try to get some money and help everybody.
In terms of the timing for construction, so they're saying that infrastructure projects that are chosen have to be implemented in 2019, 2020, or 2021. So that's our construction timeframe.
So if we got any money, it wouldn't be anywhere before we would do it 2020. We don't have the ability to do it in 2019 because we have to prepare the plan.
And just one last question. Member Oswald, go ahead.
I don't want to be last, thanks. In this project proposal, are you including any kind of PR for neighbors that surround these schools? Because I live a block from MacArthur, and I haven't heard of any of this. And I didn't know that this was happening, and it will affect my driving plans and those kinds of things. So I'm just curious if there is a plan and how you're going to go about that.
So what we do on all our city projects is what we will bid this out, design it. Before we go to construction, we usually send all the residents adjacent to any of the work a letter letting them know what's coming, that they're not going to have to pay for it. They're usually pleased. We talk about mail delivery and trash and things like that, but we're not only not blocking anybody's driveway. There's, I think, one driveway on one of my projects that I'll work with on the neighbor. It's really not that intrusive, putting some sidewalk in, taking it out. There's not a lot of dust and dirt, not a lot of noise. It usually goes pretty smoothly. We'll let the neighbors know, and that's it. They get free sidewalk. So usually we charge 100% to the adjacent neighbors for the sidewalk. So what they're going to get is free sidewalk. So anytime it's free, we usually don't hear any complaints from them.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm wishing I lived closer to a school. I just want to, as the final piece, just to echo gratitude, and also I think it's a great representation of the partnerships between the school district and the city. And thank you all so much for your work on this, and continue to let us know how we can be supportive as the school board.
Okay. We'll leave a set of these for you guys if anyone wants to look at it. Oh, I'll leave a set here for anyone that wants to take a look. We got tons of them at the office. Thank you for having us.
Great, thanks for coming. Did you guys get some of the sweetbread?
Yeah, we'll save it for you.
It's pretty amazing.
I think we would love if you all had a piece. Otherwise, you might have one.
Christmas lunch.
It's a little early in the season for seconds.
So now I feel
Okay, we'll continue on to our financial report, and I am going to turn it over to our newly ordained CFO, who I know who's had the opportunity to meet with most, if not all of us, which I really want to extend my gratitude to you for reaching out to us to sit down and talk about our priorities for the school district. And I'll turn it over to you for the financial report.
Thank you. And it's been a pleasure to meet with most of you. I just have one left Thursday. And I've really appreciated the opportunity to learn more about each of you and how we can all work together. And so I look forward to that. On the agenda, the first thing that would have been on the agenda is the audit. And I hope everyone saw the memo regarding that we will not be presenting the audit tonight. Just a couple notes on that. Want to make it clear that this was not a district issue. This was an issue with the auditor that they were not able to prepare the second tier review in time. We just found out this morning. We'd been kind of waiting on that they would be coming, and we had sent a couple emails saying, okay, we'll see you Tuesday, and just this morning, then we heard back from Jennifer Smith. So there are options for us to reschedule that presentation, and so we'll be looking for feedback from you on whether or not we want to have that before December 31st at the organizational meeting or after the organizational meeting, or at the January Business Committee meeting. There is no requirement for us to have that before we submit that final audit. It'll be your comfort level on where you'd like to see that. And then of note, the draft audit that's a part of your packet, the numbers are not going to change. What would most likely change are just some wording things or some formatting within the document is what we're hearing from Jennifer on that second tier review. So what you're seeing as far as the financial condition is not expected to change. So does anyone have any questions on the process and what happened?
Can I just clarify the date that you mentioned, December 31st? We might have a meeting on December 31st.
No, so we have to submit to the state the final audited report. So if you'd like to see it before we submit, we need to hold a meeting before December 31st. If you're fine with seeing the draft and knowing that the financials are the way they are going to be, all that the auditors are going to do is just do a walkthrough of the document, which may include just some changes in context or formatting. So in that case, we could have that presentation after December 31st, even though we're submitting that data to the state. So we could have that in early January.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. For me personally, I would prefer to have a walkthrough with Whitfleet before we submit. I just feel a little uncomfortable given some of the financial uncertainty that we've had the last year. It would be nice to sit down and have them walk us through that and be able to ask the auditors those questions directly.
And just for clarification, we won't know for sure when they're going to complete that, so it may most likely be the week between Christmas and New Year's. We'd actually see the document from them. My understanding is there's 12 districts besides ours that are in delay, so they're working on multiple districts, not just Duluth. So where we are in the pecking order of that, I'm unsure of at this point. So it would be more of as soon as we find out about it, we could post that, have that 3-day notice. And for clarification as well, we're required to submit our financial data by November 30th. So we've actually submitted the fiscal data to the department already. So what you're seeing in the report has already been submitted. This is just the paper form of that financial information that's already been submitted.
I'm not sure what the costume decor between Christmas and Hanukkah and the New Year's is, but again, I would still personally prefer that we sit down with the auditors and have them walk us through that. Member Lefferts.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that if we don't, if you submit it, or well, you have to submit it, if we can have the auditors walk us through, and they would anyways in our January meeting. So correct. Either way, they're going to walk us through the audit. I just wanted to make sure everyone heard that. And then I guess I'm just curious in terms of putting together a meeting before January or December 31st, how would that be staffed? I mean, I don't know what vacations are already scheduled and how we would work around that with our staff.
Well, the 24th, 25th, and the 1st are all holidays that the district is closed. There are staff who work in between. However, I will say the majority have already put in for vacation, and those vacations have been okayed. If we had to make it happen, we would make it happen and call folks back. But that's where we were. I think if we know ahead of time, if it were to happen before the winter break, we would need 3 days in advance to post the meeting like usual. So we're already, how far along is that? That's 2 weeks from now?
2 days.
Yeah. So I'm it kind of depends when it gets done, and we don't know their timeline, like Kathy mentioned.
We can certainly offer some narrative through email or other correspondence. Peggy and I can walk through some of the details if anyone had any specific questions on the draft to give you some assurance that what's being submitted is in its form what we're going to see financially. It's the narrative pieces that they just have a different style, and so sometimes they just change a paragraph or want things in different columns. So we're not concerned about the structure in terms of the dollars, but more of a formality. But I certainly understand wanting that review. But that said, we have submitted the fiscal data 2 weeks ago.
So I have a question then, I guess, about the process of this. Do we need to, at next week's board meeting, discuss holding a special session to walk through the audit? Because I think, regardless of how my fellow board members think, I think it's really important that the public understand what the different components of the audit are, and I think it's important that that come from a third party. And so can you help me understand what that process would be, Superintendent Cronstadt?
Usually we, have it as part of the regular board meeting. What we would do is we would schedule a committee of the whole when they were available to do that, because it would be a committee of the whole because it doesn't require action. Mm-hmm. And so whenever they're finished and they let us know when they're finished, then
we wait 3 days and
then 3 days and then
right.
they can have a meeting. Yeah.
Yep.
So, even if they can let us know, we'll be done in 3 days, it just depends on their timing.
Sure. Okay. Member Loeffler-Kemp, did you have something you wanted to add? You had your light on earlier.
Nope. I had just kind of confirmed that regardless of when we do it, the auditors are going to walk us through it. So, yeah.
I certainly understand that. I just think before it's submitted to the state, I think it would be good to discuss. But welcome to a new job when you're walking right into an audit.
It was my first phone call this morning. I'm like, this is not going to be a great day.
Oh, heavens. Okay. Anything that you would like to discuss during the budget revision or around the budget revisions?
We're just working on items, and we'll be coming to you in the next weeks with some updates.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate the work that the two of you are doing to clean up the budget and also for our future educational events around the school board budget, because I think that'll be beneficial not only for board members but certainly also for our community. So thank you in advance for all of your work that you're doing. Well, thank you presently for all the work that you're doing on that. Any discussions around the fundraisers?
I don't have anything specific unless anyone has any questions.
Does anyone know what a butter braid is?
Coffee cake?
Oh,
they're coffee cakes.
It's coffee cake.
They're delicious. I have 2 raspberry in my purse.
So we're going to have a beef jerky coffee cake fundraiser off next year, I think. All right. Moving on to discuss, I think the beef sticks are probably going to win. The fund balances discussion, page 112. Any discussion around that model policy?
We brought this forward in response to conversations that we've been having so that the board can be aware and be an active participant in the fund balance growth. After discussion, we are recommending an 8% of our operating expenditures in the general fund as a goal for our fund balance, realizing that currently we're not very close. It's going to take several years. So what we'd like to do is just open that up for discussion, and then we would be working on ways through our budget process and through maybe additional policy on making sure that we're committed to growing the fund balance. It's always a challenge to set aside funds when you need to, because there's so many unmet needs that you'd like to invest those dollars in, but a healthy fund balance is critical, and we're making slow steps, but I think we really do need to commit to that. So I appreciated the work of Peggy and other people in administration to review that and make sure that that seemed reasonable. And an 8% is a little over $8 million, which that would be terrific. But making sure that we're moving in the right direction is what we want to do.
So could you just quickly talk us through what the average, because you have so much experience working across the state, what the average fund balance is and what the steps you would propose are to get us to that level?
Thank you for that question. If you look at statewide fund balances, they're all over the place. We have many districts who are in similar positions to Duluth, and then there's other districts who have made efforts to grow their fund balance or keep a healthy fund balance. Policies range from a percentage to a number of months of operating expenditures or specific dollar amounts. The percentage gives us a goal, and I believe the language says strive to. So we know we're not going to get there all in one shot. There are many methods for us to grow the fund balance. One would be committing part of our budget each year to set aside to put into the fund balance. Other ways would just be budgeting a surplus, so making sure that the budget that we adopt has a surplus, so that would be the indicator to grow. If you look at the policy, there's two areas that are called assigned and committed fund balances. If anyone had any questions on those are designations within the unreserved fund balance for either the board or the designated administration to set aside inside of those, so those things, those priorities that the district has, so that we keep those in line for other initiatives that the board or administration have, such as technology, transportation, capital facilities. There can be any number of those that can be in there. They are a part of the undesignated fund balance, so depending on whether it's just directive by administration or board action through the board set-asides, then you can unreserve that and put that back into the unreserved fund balance. But that gives you another tool for, as you're thinking about the budget process, and not just 1 year, but into multiple years of budgeting, do we need to set those dollars aside for specific purposes? Now, many of our funds are already reserved, so we've already got those there, but then we have that unreserved where we can then put those things aside as local choices. Does that help?
That does help. Thank you. Member Oswald?
How long will it take to get 8%? And is it worth it to consider like checkpoints? Like, in 7 years, we want to at least have $2 million in the bank or something like that.
That is a really great question, and I wish I could answer that question. We have watched districts over the years do large-scale fund balance growth, and then we've seen others that have taken a very long time. The reality for the district, I think, is that it's going to be a slow and steady growth. We have so many unmet needs. Like I said, we're reviewing all the things we'd like to do, but again, that fiscal health, having that fund balance is critical, so that when those unexpected things happen, if you don't have those dollars, then we become into a critical situation where you're making short-term choices that may not be in the best interest of the district, just to solve a critical problem. So I think checkpoints are important. I'm not sure that we want to go that far into a policy, but I think that could be board initiative where you could make that a priority to make sure that we're meeting certain checkpoints, or as an administrative financial team, we would make sure that we would let the board know and let the administrative team know that direction of where we want to go. I'm certainly in favor of putting as much as we can into the fund balance, but I'm also very sensitive to all the needs and all the priorities that the district has, and I know we want to see those things happen as well. So it's kind of that fine balance of where we need to go. So theoretically speaking, if we were to put $800,000 a year, it would take us 8 years to get to that $8 million. I think $800,000 is aggressive in the beginning. But that said, knowing where future legislation is, where future funding comes from, it's not unreasonable to think that we could have that surplus. But I think this year we're kind of earmarking $500,000 would be great.
Member Sandstead.
Thanks. I did notice, Member Oswald, that the last section says we will review this annually. And I expect that it will be part of the budget discussion that we're going to have in the spring in terms of what's our first step forward in this plan that doesn't quite have a formality yet and to get us there to the end goal. My question is, the fund balance plays a key role in our bond assessment, our bond ranking, and whether or not there is a clear indicator from the folks who give us the bond rating as to what our minimum fund balance should be. I assume that 8% satisfies that. I'm wondering if it's somewhere in between or if it's a fuzzy number. That's my question.
That's a great question. When I attend audit reports for the districts that I used to support, auditors will say 3 to 6 months operating expenditures. So if you think about Duluth's general fund budget being a little over $100 million, if we had to set aside half a year's worth of our expenditures, we'd have to come up with $50 million for the fund balance, which sounds great on paper, but reality-wise, we don't see that often. If you look at sample policies, 6 to 8% is common, 10 to 12% I see often, and then the 1 to 2 month operating expenditures as well. So any amount, any policy will help, but the growth of the fund balance will also help better our financial condition and be more favorable for future borrowings.
Can I interpret that as there isn't a strict,
there is not
if we get 6 months worth, we're good. If we get 6%, we're good. It's a scale.
Right. And
they want to see growth.
We recently went through a questioning with some of the bondholders of some of our certificates of participation, and us showing a slight growth from 17 to 18 of the fund balance, they seemed very pleased. So even though it wasn't a material amount, the idea that we're moving forward and we're moving in a positive way was very favorable to them. So as long as we keep doing that, and as long as I think the checks and balances is a critical piece of that as well, I don't think you'll find 2 more dedicated people in this room who will make sure that happens than Peggy and myself. So we will be sure to be reporting on that as well. And, you know, part of it too is when there are those critical needs, sometimes you have to make those choices, and I think that's what's been happening with the district for many years, is that you've had very critical choices you've had to make, and we're going to work towards trying to find those solutions as well.
Last question I have, just for clarity, our goal is 8%. Right now, where are we?
0.5%? About 1%. Okay. A solid 1%.
About a solid 1%.
Moving forward 1%.
Okay. I certainly appreciate the work that the two of you are doing. After sitting down with the CFO, I recognize that getting to that 8% is going to require some difficult choices. And we're all on that ship together. And so that's part of, as I've met with the CFO and as Peggy and I have met over the last year, talking about how we educate ourselves and the public about how all of this works is going to be increasingly important. And so we appreciate your patience in learning financial 101s. Great. Any discussion around the deletion of policy 3017? Okay. We have no contracts, change orders, or leases to discuss. So moving on to resolutions on page 116, the acceptance of donations. Any discussion or comment? Superintendent Granza.
Yes, I hope you've noticed that the list of donations has been growing. Part of that is because we have made efforts to recognize the in-kind donations that so many of our partners and local businesses make, and we want to recognize their efforts as just as important as cash coming in, and the many ways that they provide, like a ping pong table and cars and just the manual labor of doing some things like putting gardens in or other projects around the district. And I hope you all take some time to look over those, and when we see people from these organizations or these people, to be sure to thank them in person as well.
That's a good point, and I would encourage you to continue to put those in-kind contributions on there, because it does really speak volumes about the investment that the community has in our schools and in the students and faculty that we have in our district. So thank you for that. Moving on to the certified tax levy, 2018 payable 2019. I know that our CFO is excited to talk about this. Could you turn your microphone on, please?
The resolution is just one sentence long, but there is so much to the story. Sorry. This is kind of my wheelhouse. I apologize. Next week at the regular board meeting, we'll be doing truth in taxation. I have the preliminary presentation out for review with several people to just look over. We'll be talking about several pieces of that. As you know, what you proposed, what you certified as a proposed levy in September is different than what the final levy will be, because we had a successful referendum with 2 questions. So we will be explaining both what people are going to be seeing on their proposed property tax statements, which is going to be the September proposed, and then what they'll see in the spring when they get their actual tax statements, which will be including the new referendum. So we'll be talking about those pieces. The other portion of the truth in taxation will be talking about the 2019 budget, and we'll just be talking about certain components of that as well. But for the levy piece, that final certified levy will include the successful referendum.
And can we, as board members, expect to get this? Obviously, we'll get this ahead of time, but yes, in order to ask questions.
Yes, and you'll be also getting, besides the presentation, I can't help myself, there's going to be supporting pages with each page that you're going to see in the document that will have explanations for those. So what you see and what I'll present, I'll have in writing for you so that you'll see what each column means, what each chart means, all of the documentation behind that as we go through that. So, and then if you have any questions on that, I would surely welcome any phone calls or emails that I could provide for clarification.
Wonderful. Member Oswald?
I haven't taken the time to look up last year's tax levy that we set. Is this more or less than we did approved last year?
That's a great question. From last year to September proposed, the increase was 1.65%. So we did see an increase. And then with the successful referendum, which is generating the renewal plus the second question is about 7.6 million of levy. Keep in mind, That first question, the renewal, has $764,000 of state aid attached to it. So when we talk about the referendum, and you probably hear the number 3.3 million was what that generated, 764,000 of that was state aid. So we didn't have to put that whole question on the levy, which is great news for us. The overall increase is going to be 8.3 million, which includes from the proposed. There were other things on the levy besides the referendum that happened during the proposed time, some increases, and we'll talk about those. So that gets us to a net 8.3, which is about little under 26%.
Okay. I appreciate your enthusiasm for numbers.
I also think when I met with the CFO, she's really excited about educating not only the board, but also the public about how all of this works. So I think especially considering that we just went through this levy, that will be a much appreciated presentation on Tuesday. So thank you for your work on that.
Thank you.
Moving on to the resolution to combine polling places. Superintendent, or would somebody like to give us a little bit of background on this? I know this has come up before, so.
Thank you. This is a resolution that is more process than it is most likely practical, because at this time I do not anticipate that we would be seeing any special election outside of the general election. But should the district need a special election in this odd numbered year, currently we have 39 polling places. If we do not pass this resolution, we would have to run all of those polling places for, say, a limited. An example would be if a board member was unable to serve and we needed to have a special election, we would have to have open polling places. Should there be a general obligation bond that would be sold or had a referendum for, that would be as well. So this is more just a process that happens that you have just in case. Jackie and Melinda went through the entire map and found those centrally located places within each district and made this recommendation. I hope you had an opportunity to review it. If anyone had any questions or concerns, they can be edited before the resolution. What we did find for clarification is we are not able to change them once we pass the resolution, so we may not increase. The only thing we could do is ignore it and go to the full 39. So we couldn't go from 5 to 10 or 5 to 15. We would either have to take this resolution or abandon the resolution and go with our full polling places. But again, the process is here because this is what state statute says. In 2017, they said, if you want to have limited polling places, you have to do it prior to December 31st of the next calendar year. So we're just setting that as a placeholder, but unless I know something different, we do not have any intention to actually have anything. This would just be for an unforeseen potential election.
I just wanted to you said it right at the end there too. I just wanted to make sure people knew that this does not apply to the general election. This is only if there was an unforeseen emergency election. I don't know if emergency is the right word, but unforeseen.
I'm concerned because selecting one place per district is still not equitable, because different socioeconomic statuses exist between different districts, and it will make it a lot harder for those perhaps in District 4 to get to the one polling place, being that, all the way out into the Fond du Lac neighborhood is a long way from Asbury, and that it's more advantageous to people with privilege and means and transportation to attempt to go there. I would like to see more polling places, but I'd be happier if we were able to do a mail-in election. Is that possible?
So obviously there's absentee balloting that's always available during that process, so someone would have the opportunity to do the mail portion of that through absentee balloting. Mail ballots are only for specific referendums, so I don't know that through a special election, say for a school board member, that would be eligible, but we could certainly look into the details. And I appreciate your comments, and I think both Jackie and Melinda, in working through it, were just kind of doing that centralized, and I think are open to having discussion, and we could modify that. We had discussions on what number made sense, and we could have come up with 3 or 4 or 5 different versions of this. We just put forward the original with the hope that there would be some discussion, and if people were comfortable with it, again, keeping in mind that we don't expect that we would even be using this, but certainly if the situation arose, we would either be bound to this or bound to none of them in doing our full polling places.
Right. So I'm thinking if it's a district seat that's open, then it creates a single polling place.
Correct.
For people to come vote at if they care to vote in their district. Okay. And, I don't see it being a lot of participation because it typically isn't, and I understand that, but I think more than one choice is better.
And certainly we looked at this from the cost. I know there's a sheet in there as well, just trying to be sensitive of those things that are related to the cost of elections. They can be spendy, so we just were being thoughtful of that as well. But I think it's open for discussion and modification if the board felt like we wanted to do it in a different way.
Can you remind me the last time this came in front of the board? Because I remember having a similar conversation. I don't know if I was in the audience or on the board at the time.
It came up last year. There wasn't... There we go. It did come up about a year ago at this time, but there wasn't any discussion at the committee meeting about it. And so when it came to the board meeting, then there was discussion and then there was confusion. And so we said for last year we were going to put that off. I think there was some confusion between it being for the general election, knowing that we were going to go out for a referendum, or a special election. And so we wanted to be clear this time that this would only be in case of a special election and not the general election that would happen in November.
And is there a reason that you're bringing this back to the table?
It comes up every year.
Okay. I guess I would like to echo Member Oswald's comments, and I think I shared this last year too. I'm really concerned about how this may disproportionately impact communities that are of lower income. And I think especially, we're on the heels of an election where we saw heavy gerrymandering that was rigged against people of color and people who were low income. Not that I'm comparing the two, but I understand that there's a cost associated with it, and we need to be mindful of our fiduciary responsibility. But I'm wondering if there's some alternatives that we could look at, like if it was a special election for a new school board member, could we look at adopting a policy like the city council does? If we're just filling a seat for a year or two where the council decides or the board decides, as opposed to needing to open up polling or voting for that. I just think there are some other ways that we can do this that ensure, I guess it sounds a little hypocritical if it's equitable voting while also trying to be responsible on the financial side of things. But I just have a lot of concerns about limiting polling places.
Just around the school board member piece, there's statute that gives direction on, it's in different places in your term are different ways that we need to address it. And so that is spelled out in statute. I think it's if there's less than half of your term left, it's different than if there's more than half of your term left. So,
Maybe we shouldn't use that as an example.
Right. Yep. Right.
I just want to clarify that So this only comes up if we're having a special election, not a regular election, and if I win the lottery and there's an election for the 3rd district seat in June of next year, let's say, which I'm sure wouldn't happen according to the way things are filled under statute if the seat would be up again in November. But say we needed to hold something in June, you would bring this back to us and we would get to decide whether or not to do the limited versus the regular and pay for everything. So we still have the option to unrestrict if it becomes necessary to have a special election. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks. Thank you again for all the work that has been put into this in thinking about the polling locations. I would have concern about limiting the number of polling locations as well. And my question is did you guys speak with anyone at the city clerk's office or the county office on elections, just in terms of their thoughts if we were to limit polling locations, which ones we would want to limit them to, just with their knowledge of staffing voting locations and all of that they do. So just input on that.
I would have to defer to Jackie and Melinda, who did that. I know they took the map and took all the polling places, looked at accessibility, looked at parking, the largest places that could handle the largest number of people. But certainly they would be open and willing to do any adjustments that the board felt comfortable with. And I'll just, again, not seeing a need for it, just having it available should something unexpected happen. So, but completely understand the concerns.
Do you have to take off? Okay, so do you want to ask?
Reiterate one more time. This doesn't restrict polling places. This gives us the option, should we wish to restrict polling places in a very limited scenario that is not going to happen. So I will support it.
Thanks, Member Sandstead. Have a good evening. Member Gorham?
I appreciate the thought that was put into this, and I guess one criteria I'd be looking at is accessibility to the sites via transit, and how many transit lines and how frequently. I know at least one or two on here aren't, and certainly understandable when you're talking about a township location. I think that's very valid, but I think when you ensure that there's access by transit, especially frequent transit, you can have some reasonable expectation that people would be able to get there. I would feel a little better about that. And I do think adding maybe one more possibility in District 4 would be nice, but no, I'm probably making things unclear. I would feel much more comfortable if there was another option in District 4 that was closer and more centrally located.
Thanks, Member Gorham. One last thought. Did we run this through our equity accountability tool? Because this seems like the perfect opportunity to do that. And in fact, I would feel, I really appreciate Member Sandsted's reiteration that we would have the opportunity to decide on this, but it seemed, this is a pretty significant statement to the community if you don't understand the full background. And so I guess my preference would be to push a decision on this until it's gone through the equity accountability tool. Member Oswald?
I just wanted to comment, I think it's actually maybe more important with District 3 to add another spot, because the Duluth Heights Community Club is away from the central Lincoln Park housing stock of people that are most likely not to have transportation and to have access to transportation. So I think somewhere in Lincoln Park, within below Skyline kind of thing, I guess I should kind of, Lincoln Park's a big place, but that it just makes more sense to have it closer to people without means than it is for people with means. People with means can get wherever.
Just as a clarification, the number of polling places has to be equal in each district. So if there's certain districts that we would see more, we would just add those to each one. So if we wanted to add 1 or 2, that would increase it from 4 or 5 to 15 or 10 or how, and that's totally fine.
Member Laflacan.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, thank you for clarifying that. I would preference wanting to have at least 2 in each, and I know there's a cost. And then I think you said this when you presented, but that we have it in already existing polling places, that we don't kind of create new polling places, which...
That is a requirement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're all going to come to your house for almond bread.
That would be okay?
Member Oswald, we're going to need a light off.
That's okay. I think I forgot what I was going to say.
We're thinking about the almond bread.
Right. I do want to say that, or respond to Member Sandsted's concern that she can support this, but I don't want it to be when we need it, do you need to rely on it, and you walk in and you have a terrible option and an expensive option. That's not good policy. So I would really like to at least have our minimum standard present. And I think our minimum standard is a little bit more than this. Understanding there's cost, but we're about democracy, so we got to pay for our voting, and I think we have to support our community being able to support us. So
we can certainly bring another revised with more locations before the December 18th meeting. Since that is our last scheduled meeting before December 31st, we would need the board to take action on something next week. But we can certainly work on that. I know we had that discussion, and I think it's probably already in the works, but we didn't know for sure what to bring. We didn't know. So this was kind of that first draft of what we've seen other communities do. So we went with that, but knowing that there could be some concern, and that I think it can be easily adaptable to adding additional polling places if that's what you'd like to see.
Thank you for that. I know we can't vote on anything officially in the committee, but I think we're hearing that maybe seeing some additional numbers for additional polling places, recognizing that we need to have the same amount of polling places in each district would be beneficial for us. I know it's a very difficult balance, and you and I spoke about this last week, and I appreciate your efforts, both you and Peggy, in trying to identify ways to reduce expenditures across the district, because we're running on a shoestring, and how do you balance priorities? So I think having a little bit more information for us would be helpful, so thank you for that.
And we'd be happy to do that, and I think both Peggy and I feel good about the fact that we don't think we'll be expending anything next year on this. But again, I certainly understand that should a situation come up, you don't want to be forced to have a choice out there that doesn't make you feel comfortable. But we would need that resolution, so if we chose not to do something about it, we would not have that option after December 31st. So if you're comfortable with us coming up with a revised resolution before next week and presenting that to you for discussion, that it could come up, that would be great.
And I'm guessing it's probably too late to run it through the equity accountability tool, but I guess I would hope that next year that become, especially as we're looking at elections next year, I would hope that become, or maybe elections next year, that would become a priority, because I think it's a perfect opportunity to utilize that community-built and driven tool. Moving on, we already discussed the Safe Routes to School grants. Any updates on property sales? Superintendent?
There has been continued interest in the central site. I know it's been shown a few more times. It seems like every week somebody else is looking at properties, but we have not received any offers at this time. As far as conversations about this building, I can't think of the word, the audit on what would need to be done to this building to bring it up to 50-year State is underway, so that once that is completed, we will know how much it would cost to refurbish and continue to be in this building. And once we have that information, that would be a good starting point for where to go from where we are.
And do we know when that audit will be completed, Mr. Spooner?
I don't yet. I'm anticipating January, February, March possibly.
Okay, great, thank you. If any former Trojans are watching this, both buildings would be great ways to honor your alma mater. Moving on to expenditure contracts. Any questions or comments on those? That might be a first. Mainly because I don't have any questions on them, which is really what the first is. The no-cost contracts, starting on page 199. Any comments there? All right. Facilities management and capital projects status report. Mr. Spooner, anything that you would like to highlight?
It's been a busy month. Our maintenance and operations staff we're always busy. There's never a lack of things to do. We haven't had to remove a lot of snow and ice yet, so it's been a good year for that. We, as indicated, the lease with the Hills is finalized and executed, so that is completed. One cost item that I haven't even brought up with Kathy and Bill yet is Bill likes it when I spring things on him.
We're going to call you Mr. Springer instead of Mr. Spooner.
This is kind of not an interesting, but it's a unique situation where the FCC has sold to T-Mobile Cell the 600 to 700 megahertz range. And many of if I were in the gym right now at East High School and I were communicating on a wireless mic, that transmits on that same frequency. And we're doing an audit right now, and we don't know how many are impacted, but I can tell you at East we have 8 wireless microphone systems that are in that range that we will have to replace. And, if you extrapolate 8 at East, there might be 8 at Denfeld, maybe 4 and 4 at the 2 middle schools, and maybe 1 at the elementaries, or 2 possibly. And I don't know the total cost yet, but it's something that we will have to replace because they will become non-functional, and for sure in 2020. T-Mobile has started to use the frequency in St. Louis County now, so there is some interference at East, for example. We're having trouble already. So it's kind of a unique situation, but it will require general fund dollars to replace these systems that were installed 10 years ago, but it was never anticipated, and nobody could have known that the FCC would sell that frequency. So that's one issue that I'll be bringing forth in probably a month or two when I know the numbers that we have to expend to replace the systems that are not usable. Other than that, I've talked about the audit will begin shortly. And we're working with the Hills. There is one project left, LTFM project. At Rock Ridge, we're replacing that gym floor. Building operations has been busy, and health and safety is normal for the month. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Are there subsidies that are available to the school district through the FCC or USAC for some of those changes? I know we have access to them in healthcare, so wondering if...
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And we have signs all over the building saying don't slip on the ice for workman's comp claims. Right?
We do our best.
Joke. Great. Well, we already discussed sale of properties. Is there a reason we have that in two places on the agenda? Because it's a placeholder and then it's also at the end of the facilities report.
I think the update is where we include the report from Mr. Fulmer. It's on page 212. The placeholder is in case we would have an offer
Gotcha.
That's where that would be.
Okay, thank you. Great. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, we'll adjourn the business committee meeting.
I just would like to add that to your question regarding rebates from the FCC, I don't believe there are any from the FCC. I haven't seen anything, but I know there are vendors that are offering discounted equipment, but I don't know if it's really a discount until we really dig into it and see. So you might see a vendor saying that we'll, due to this new sale of frequencies, due to the sale, we'll sell you this at X amount off. But
right.
Does it really mean it's a better deal until you actually look at it?
Right,
So.
yeah, that fine print. I just know that the Universal Service Fund frequently provides subsidies for certain parts of IT infrastructure that may or may not be available to various nonprofits,
Right.
including school boards.
I'll definitely look into it.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, that adjourns the business committee meeting. Thank you, everyone.